Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone. My name is Lisette Guerra and I'm the archivist and librarian here at the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center. It is our honor and privilege to be here to witness this historic event with Mr. Montes, Dr. Sanchez, and Mr. Ramirez, and Dr. Alvarez, and Dr. Rona Fields, all here to talk about the founding of the Brown Beret organization. We're all very excited. And we're also excited to formally announce that that Dr. David Sanchez has donated his archival papers here to the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center. And if I'm not mistaken, and stop me if I am, Mr. Montes donated his archive to Cal State Los Angeles. So we are also very excited. Some of it, but it's there. To announce that as well. And with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Milo Alvarez. He is an assistant professor of history at Bard College, Simmons Rock, and a doctoral candidate in the Department of History. He earned a master's degree in history from UC Riverside, and while an undergraduate at UCLA, was an active participant in MECHA during the 1990 through 1993 struggle to establish the Chicano Studies Department. Thank you. I mean, it's thanks to activists like these that, this center is here and the department, so thank you so much. His dissertation, entitled On the Shoulders of Generations, the Brown Berets of Aztlán in the Long Civil Rights Era, is the first comprehensive national study of the Brown Berets, as well as the first examination of the Chicano movement in a national context. He is also the creator and moderator of the Chicano Historians Network. Thank you, Milo. Now I give the floor to Milo, and he will be introducing the panelists and start moderating. Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the Berets organization. I've been researching the organization, the never-ending dissertation that's being written. I've gone around the country and interviewed Brown Berets from all over the nation. And it's important to just realize that the organization itself, while it began in East Los Angeles, spread throughout the country. But I'm going to go ahead and read you some academic-y type of stuff just to get us started, and then introduce David and the rest of the panelists. Founded in East Los Angeles, California in 1967, the Brown Berets were a mix of barrio youth, ranging from college and university students, Vietnam veterans, and vatos locos, homies, and included both men and women members. Within 1 year after its founding, the organization had grown throughout the United States with chapters located in the Southwest, the Midwest, and the Pacific Northwest. There were chapters in obvious places like Los Angeles, California, of course, and Dallas, Texas, a lot of Mexicans in Texas, and other places like Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Yakima, Washington. In fact, in my research, the largest Brown Beret file outside of the East Los Angeles is the Kalamazoo chapter, right? Who knew, right? In this way, the Brown Berets were arguably the largest and most geographically expansive Chicano movement organization of its day. I think one could argue the UFW had an equal range or somewhat equal range, but the Brown Berets are pretty much a national organization in some ways. As such, its platform spread throughout the country and impacted the movement in a fundamental way. So the Chicano movement isn't something that just exists in the Southwest, but in fact existed all over the nation. Chicago currently is the fourth largest Mexican city in the country right now. And during the movement period, it ranged somewhere between the second and the fourth largest. So this is important to recognize, particularly in reorganizing and re-understanding reorganizing our thoughts on the movement and re-understanding the movement as a whole as truly a national phenomenon. I would argue that much of what we call today Latino party politics was really, the agendas were really set during the movement. And they were set during the movement not just in the Southwest, but nationally. So again, this is important to recognize. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, the Berets were also prominent leaders in major Chicano era movement events, such as the 1968 East Los Angeles High School walkouts, as we know. They participated in the 1969 Chicano Youth Liberation Conference. And I argue that in Denver is really where the Brown Berets got a lot of exposure to youth across the country. As a matter of fact, the Kansas City chapter members that I interviewed told me that when they saw the Brown Berets, just the visual of them in the berets, in the uniforms, it was something they needed to take back to Kansas City, and they did. So the youth conference actually plays a much bigger role, I think, in understanding the movement through a national prism because of its central location. It was accessible to Mexicans in Nebraska and Kansas and Chicago, and yes, there were Mexicans in Nebraska and Kansas, right? So in that way, the participation in the youth conference was important. And obviously, the Berets were part of the leadership of the National Chicano Moratorium in 1970. And in digging deeper into the moratorium, there were actually 3 moratorium events, right? 69, 70, and 71. The Brown Berets often organized with other Chicano movement organizations, such as the United Farm Workers, La Raza Unida Party, the Alianza Nuevo Mexico, the Crusade for Justice organization in Denver, and Mecha chapters throughout the nation. And this is somewhat of a misnomer because, in fact, they were often members of these organizations as well. So it's not like there were membership. Chicano movement activists often were members of multiple organizations, and that's also important to recognize because the platforms of each of those organizations were sort of cross-breeding, cross-pollinating in some sense, right? Additionally, Brown Beret members were participants in national movements of the 1960s and 70s era as a whole, such as the Poor People's Campaign and national events ranging from the Chicago Democratic National Convention, or Police Riot of 1968, and there were Chicanos that were Brown Beret members at the 1973 American Indian Movement Siege of Wounded Knee. Okay, so, and everything in between in this era, right? So it's important to think about, again, not just this organization as something that existed in this space or in the space of Los Angeles or the Southwest, but broadly. In spite of the Brown Berets' reputation as epitomizing youth militancy during the Chicano movement era, the organizations are relatively innocuous, having been influenced by the participation of its founding members in Los Angeles-sponsored youth leadership camps. And local activist Episcopalian church, of which the founder of the Berets, David Sanchez, who is with us, was an active member. In addition, the organization's original 10-point platform addressed long-standing political issues within the Mexican-American community, such as fair employment, education, equal protection, and access to housing. Okay, so this notion that there's a Mexican-American generation and a Chicano generation is an important one to explore, given that the Berets platform initially was very much what the older generations were really interested in: equity, in education, jobs discrimination, things that had been long-standing issues in the community. The Kansas City chapter of the Brown Berets organized trash pickups because the municipality, the city of Kansas City, would not pick up trash in the Mexican community on a regular basis. And if you go back and look in the archives, this has been an issue in Kansas City since the 1920s. And the Brown Berets were organizing it during the 60s and 70s. So things like this, I think that are important to recognize. Obviously, there are other more larger issues such as school reform and protesting against the Vietnam War, right? Beret membership, again, consisted of working class Chicano high school students and university students, high school dropouts, ex-Vietnam veterans, as I mentioned before, and really importantly, especially for some chapters, gang members. Chicano gang activity reduced during this time period significantly while the Berets were active. And wherever they were active, gang activity often declined. In places like Chicago, I spoke to some Chicago members, literally youth gangs were turned into Brown Beret chapters. And all of that energy that was utilized in sort of, doing what gangs do was then put towards the movement. And in that way, I think the Brown Berets' contribution is important because hardly any other Mexican-American or Chicano organization wanted to touch that group, right? The so-called lumpen proletariat, as Marx would tell us, right? The homeboys, the gang members. And the Brown Berets were really one of the only organizations that would do that. So it's important to sort of recognize that they tried to sort of redeem what many in our own community many in our own community thought these folks were unredeemable, right? They were not going to contribute positively. And the Berets made an attempt to target these groups, and that's an important contribution to the movement as well, in that sense. The response to Brown Beret militancy was somewhat mixed, as some middle-class Mexican Americans were wary of being associated with the Brown Berets. They were deemed not respectable by both whites or established Mexican American organizations. So there was some like generational tension as well. For example, as historian Lilia Fernandez observes, the LULAC of Chicago had particular animosity towards the Brown Berets and towards radical elements in the community, and they actually used some of their organizational funds to fight against the Brown Berets, or to flyer against them, or to speak publicly against the organization. On the other hand, there were chapters that were supported by older generations of Mexican Americans because they thought that the Brown Berets brought something to the table that was needed, and sometimes it was just simply an intimidating presence, right? But it was something that was utilized by some of the chapters, by some of the older Mexican American activists. And again, this varies from city to city, and that's the other thing I want to emphasize: is this is not an organization. It really is organizations. This is a plural sort of movement in a sense. While the main chapter or the founding chapter was here in East Los Angeles, it's something that was broad, and every chapter really exhibited its own uniqueness and had its own platforms and really raised its own issues that were relevant to its own communities. So in that sense, I think it's really important because this organization, while it began here, what it sort of spawned and how it expanded is something that that sort of grew organically from community to community. So I just want to sort of emphasize that point as well. And in spite of the fact that this chapter in East Los Angeles lasted about 5 years or so, and it was declared to be no longer in existence, other chapters lasted far longer. Chapters in Texas lasted into the late 70s. The Chicano newspaper out in Milwaukee that many of the Brown Berets participated in actually kept publishing until 1981. So this is a movement, and this organization was part of the movement in a way that really sort of expanded and extended the reach of what we think of and understand as the Chicano movement. So having said all of this, I want to introduce the panelists. I wanted to speak about it in this larger national context, partly because that's how I'm looking at it, but partly because I think that it's not just about Los Angeles, right? What happened here, what was founded here, was something that was national in scope, and that's really important to recognize. And I think we really need to start to think about the movement in that way, because it was a much broader scope of things. So our panelists are David Sanchez, who's the founder of the organization. Maybe you can raise your hand. Yes. Carlos Montes, who's also an active participant in the Brown Berets as well. And Ralph Ramirez, who's also one of the founders of the organization. And we also have with us Rona Fields, who was the first person to actually write a scholarly piece on the Brown Berets, and it was her dissertation on the Brown Berets. So she's on Skype. So
hey Rona, how you
doing?
Hi.
So,
well, I'm eager to see all of you. I can only see part of you at a time, but
Rona, I think we should recall because I think the connection's not great anymore. I'm going to call you right back.
Okay.
Is she video right here or up there?
should we wait till we connect?
Yeah.
LA was actually the national office,
Rhoda?
right, David?
Yes.
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so David, we'll take it away from here. Are we okay?
I guess one of the things that I'd really like to do is to set the psychological and sociological basis of the Brown Berets and who they are and what they became.
Let's talk to Rona and tell her, or you want to let her speak?
If she wants to, I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know.
because
Rona, how you doing? It's David Sanchez.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to be talking real quick, and then they're going to give you a spot as soon as I finish.
Oh, okay.
Okay? All right. Good seeing you.
Can she see us? Yeah, she can
Well,
see.
I can't see you. I wish I could.
I can see you.
Oh, let's see. Wait, are these two fellows sitting in front?
Yeah, it's Ralph and Carlos.
Oh, for goodness sake.
That's small world, isn't it? Okay,
You are the now grandfathers.
let me get started. Rhoda. Okay? All right, let me get started. I think there's a lot of things to discuss here. I think he put some of the things in context that it was a national organization, and because it was a national organization, we had like a network all over the country, which was promoting the Chicano movement in all different cities, not just in East LA. But also throughout California. For example, in California, we had like 40 chapters, and the rest of we had another 20 chapters around the other states. Let me start from the beginning. Glad to see you all here, and I'd like to welcome you all. Also, one of the reasons why we have this this important event is because I submitted some archives to the school here. And the archives are important because it even goes into some of the FBI records, which they talked about us, bad about us. They talked about Ralph Ramirez and me trying to knock down the fence over at Garfield High School during the 1968 walkouts. You know, they talked about Carlos Motel, they talked bad about Carlos Motel. Anyway, you know, the beginning of the movement, I guess we can just kind of go over lightly how it all began. I think it was just the fact that some of the leaders in the Brown Berets had been victims and witnesses to so much suffering in our community. And this is what got us to get involved, because we saw these things happening to our community, and we're tired of being harassed. All of us were cruisers to some degree on Whittier Boulevard, and we're always getting harassed by the sheriff or by the CHP. So when the organization came about, we kind of got alarmed to begin to organize our community. I began with David Salcedo. His name was Innocent. David Salcedo, we used to play rock and roll guitar together at Roosevelt High School. And also Rob was with us over at Roosevelt High School. And I kind of think that's where kind of started began at Roosevelt High School, where we started to see what was really going on. One summer, when I was like about 15 years old, I was with David Salcedo. We were looking for a summer job, and we said, well, let's go to St. Vincent de Paul. Maybe they'll hire us, camp counselors in the summertime or something like that. So we went to St. Vincent de Paul, and the Catholics and all, they turned us down. So we went to the next place. We went to the Episcopal Church. They said there's another church down there. Just asked them if they want to hire some counselors. So we went to the Episcopal Church, and we met Virginia Ram there, who was the director of programs, and then we met Father Luz. John B. Luz, who ended up becoming the Pope of the church, and not the Pope, but the national Archbishop of Episcopal Church in the United States. Anyway, so he hired us to work as counselors, and we through him and through other organizations we met. I also worked at the Boys and Girls Club over in Lincoln Heights, and I met Richard Aratore. And Richard Aratore had a project called Young Youth Participation for Community Projects. Anyway, he was working for the community services. Richard Aratore, I really thought Richard Aratore was a civil rights leader, but it didn't turn out that way. Anyway, he got us, so he got me involved with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council because they needed some Chicanos to sit on that board. And the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, I was in high school at the time, was established by Mayor Sam Yorty. And the idea was to establish these mayor youth advisory councils all over the country to give youth a chance to talk about some of the issues in their community. And anyway, we were able to, I ran for office also, Moctezuma Esparza, he was a parliamentarian, and I became president. When I was elected president, all of a sudden I look out the window at the City Hall, and people are demonstrating, 150 young Republicans are demonstrating outside the window, because I got elected. And I asked people, why are they demonstrating because I got elected? They said they're demonstrating because you got elected because you're a Chicano. I said, oh, okay. So I talked to Moctezuma Esparza. I said, Moctezuma Esparza, this election was fair, wasn't it? It was a fair election. And then Moctezuma Esparza, he had that fancy talk, you know, according to parliamentary procedure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know, this was a fair election. You want fair and square. So I became the president of the first Mayor's Youth Advisory Council for the city of Los Angeles, and I was thinking, what, 16 years old, something like that. Anyway, that kind of just led to other things. I had gone to a coffee house at USC, and because, you know, I work with different organizations. I was always looking for jobs. I did work for the Boys Club. I worked for the Teen Post. And at the Teen Post, I had Teen Post at USC, at the Unitarian Church. And downstairs at USC, at the Unitarian Church, there was a coffee house, you know, called the Cheshire Cat. And so I used to go sometimes spend weekends at that church over at USC. And they had this coffee house called the Cheshire Cat. I said, man, this is great. And I said, this is what we need. We need a coffee house in East LA, you know, so we can hang out, have a place to hang out. Anyway, so I talked to Virginia Ram about, hey, I want to put a coffee house in East LA. She says, well, you better write a proposal then. I said, well, how do you write a proposal? You know, she said, well, it's real simple, you know, purpose and method, you know, write the philosophy, you know, write these things down. I said, well, I can write that. So I wrote a proposal, and I submitted to the Southern California Council of Churches, and the proposal was accepted by the Southern California Council of Churches. Jack Pratt was the head of it at the time. And he said, yeah, so he gave us the money to open the coffee, at least for the rent and all the bills. And so we got the money to open the coffee house, and the name of the coffee house was La Piraña. Now this was before the Brown Berets had began. Okay, and before the Brown Berets had began, we developed an organization called Young Citizens for Community Action. This was with Richard Torre, Moctezuma was in there, Vicky Castro was in that particular group. And so all of a sudden, the group kind of started to split up into two for many reasons. And I told Ralph, I remember telling Ralph, hey Ralph, we gotta get more militant now. You know, we gotta get more on the ball. You know, Young Citizens for Community Action don't look right. You know, so I talked to Ralph and a couple other people about changing the name from Young Citizens for Community Action to Young Chicanos for Community Action. And so I said, Ralph, can we do this? Can we get the votes? Ralph said, yeah, we can get the votes. You know, so we got the votes and we changed the name from Young Citizens for Community Action to Young Chicanos for Community Action. Okay, so then we got the coffee house, right? Okay, so the coffee house is open. We had like 2 different grand openings. The first one, nobody showed up. We had another grand opening. Okay, we had this wonderful coffee house called the Piraña Coffee House, and that's where the Brown Berets began to develop. After we had gone through these steps of converting nice organizations into other organizations to the Brown Berets. So once it became Young Chicanos for Community Action, okay, a lot of people left, like Paula Cristoso, she left. She couldn't handle the Chicano thing. Vicky Castro left. Moctezuma Esparza left. And so it was, you know, so it was just some of the main people, myself, Ralph. And so we went ahead and we were Young Chicanos for Community Action. And then we decided to take it one step further. What happened was Virginia Ram, once again she comes into the picture again. They're having a rummage sale at the Episcopal Church. And so there was a blue beret, you know, on the table. She was selling blue beret. I told her, I want that beret. I remember Ralph was saying he wanted the beret too. Because we had been down to San Jose, and the Mecha, they were called Umas at the time, Mecha from San Jose used to wear blue berets, you know. So finally I convinced Virginia to give me the beret. So I got the brown beret. I don't know if we were fighting for the beret, but anyway, I got the brown beret, the blue beret, and I was wearing the blue beret. I said, no, this ain't not right, you know. So I thought about it. A couple of days went by, went downtown, and I asked the man, you know, at the hat shop, General Hat Shop downtown at 7th and Main. I said, do you got any brown berets? He goes, yeah, I got some brown berets. I said, I want one. He said, let me have a brown beret. So he gave me a brown beret, sold me a brown beret. It was a couple of dollars. And at that point, I was wearing the brown beret, and I was at the time I was working for another job. Sal Castro was the director of Magnolia Elementary School playground director, and I told Sal Castro, you know, can I get a job there? You know, because I was, you know, I was going to college and looking for after-school jobs. You know, I had to pay for my lowrider car and other stuff. So I told him. So he said, yeah, you can work for the playground. So I was working for Sal Castro at Magnolia Elementary School, and I was wearing my brown beret that I bought downtown. Okay, so I'm walking around with this brown beret, and one of these little kids says, hey, brown beret. I go, what, man? He says, you're a brown beret? I go, yeah. you know. Anyway, so the idea of Brown Beret was already set in my mind, so I went back to the coffee house and talked to everybody about changing the name from Young Chicanos for Community Action on a consensus. People thought it was a good idea. And that's one of the successes of the Brown Berets was we always discussed things on a consensus. Whenever I made a move or a decision, it was talk to the commanders first, see what they think, and then move with the decision of the consensus. It was always like that all the way through. Even throughout the Southwest, when we organized all these different chapters all over the country. It was always on consensus, leadership on consensus. Anyway, at that time, we continued on to organize, so we became Brown Berets. One of the first things that happened, when we were at the coffee house, so we changed it into the Brown Berets. And what happened was Danny Hernandez got hung at the East Side Sheriff's Station. And so, we had a lot of people were just sitting around the coffee house. We were just sitting around there. And it's just a regular coffee house day. And then all of a sudden, we're going to go pick at the sheriff's station. Let's go pick at the sheriff's station. And so some of the people, there weren't that many of us, but I bought a dozen. I went and bought a dozen Brown Berets and brought them to the coffee house. So we just started handing them out to the customers. Put them on, we're going to go pick it. We went to go pick it at the sheriff's station, right? And we were picketing down there. And we, sometimes we would pick it, but sometimes we would run in circles. I think that's called dragon march, when you actually run in a circle with picket signs. And so we went down to the sheriff's station, and that was the first pickets that ever took place in East LA to protest the murder of Danny Hernandez and the murder of many Chicanos that took place during those times. There's really so much history to discuss. I don't know if I can discuss all of it, but I will discuss some of it. I think the people in the Brown Berets who came into the Brown Berets, there were a lot of people who were willing to sacrifice, understanding that even though we did suffer in our sacrifice, all of us, I think, all three of us, Ralph, Ramirez, Carlos, myself, I think all of us went to jail at least, 10 times? At least 10 times, right? Not more. Anyway, the cops were on us, they were on our backs. And it was so bad that I'd come out of my front door at my mom's house, and there would be a police car parked in front of my house, But not just that, but also our family and our friends were involved. My sister, for example, Arlene Sanchez, I noticed her picture. She was in one of these books, photography books, where it said she's carrying a sign that says Chicano Power. I don't know if you've seen that book. Anyways, it's on here in the library, produced by this organization. Anyway, my sister Arlene Sanchez recruited a bunch of girls to join the organization. And the coffee house became the center of organizing. One of the first things that took place was the walkouts, I guess, one of the most significant events. And I think that's something that we knew and that we understood, was that events were like history. That was our science. Our science was a political science. Our science was a movement science, where we began to understand that if we can create events, then we could change history. And so our eye was on events, to make events happen. Of course, in all history is always shaped by either battles or by leaders or people who create events. So in the creation of events, one of the first events that we began to look at were the conditions in the schools. Several years before, I'm talking about all the way back to the 90s, before the Brown Berets. In 1966, we circulated, when I was in high school, we circulated a petition to all the schools. It's in the movie Walkout. When the movie Walkout, remember the students, they circulated a petition to the students. And I remember we were writing these questions to give the students because we were doing a survey. And one of the questions that we were going to put on there was, "Are you lonely?" Anyway, it was just one of the questions that we thought about, because we had to actually write these questions, 20 questions, a survey, we circulated all through the school district. We were going to take the survey to Dr. Nava, and then Dr. Nava was there, and he was able to bring the survey before the school district to look at all of the major problems that the students were facing. Many of the same problems that the students face today. I think the significant thing is that we were persistent in what we did. We were persistent in a way that we knew we had to do this particular job that had to be done, and we were very serious. We didn't want just a little bit. We figured that applying pressure, okay, to exert force was to apply pressure. That's what it says in the Brown Book. That we were there to exert force, to apply pressure, to make changes occur. And this is what we did, and this is what we were good at. Many times they didn't like the pressure. Many times we went to jail as a result of the pressure. An example of that was the arrest after the school walkouts. I think the significant thing about the Brown Berets was that we were, to some degree, a regiment. And when I say a regiment, we were not 100% military, but we did have some kind of rank and file system. You know. Some people complain, oh, you know, the guys, you know, they're too strict, or sometimes people complain that, oh, the Brown Berets, you know, they're too, you know, you can't do this and you can't do that. But the reality was that the Brown Berets were not a democratic organization. I mean, we had meetings, and you could say whatever you wanted to say, but when it came to the formal command, it was the consensus of opinion that to make a move, to complete a mission came first. And so that's what we did all over and over again. Consensus on the mission and follow through on the mission. And the sacrifice took place. So many events. I can't even cover all of the events that took place over something like 6 or 7 year period. It was always constantly crisis. There was always a crisis at the Brown Beret office. There was always a crisis in our community. And I think that's what motivated the movement. The walkouts, for example. The walkouts started at the Piranha Coffee House. A number of student organizations came there. UMAS was there. A number of different student organizations and even some clubs were there. South Castle was there. We were all Brown Berets were there. We had a meeting at the coffee house, and we decided that there was a need to follow up on the survey that we gave to LA Unified School District, that there was a need to apply pressure on the school system, and that the only way we could apply pressure with the LA school system was to make a walkout, to make demands. At the meeting, we met at the coffee house. This was something like in January of 1968. We met at the coffee house to write up some demands, and then we understood that we were going to walk out the schools in June of 1968. What happened was, we felt, at least the Brown Berets felt, that June was too late. Everybody voted to walk out in June. But the Brown Berets, we felt that no, the schools were ready to walk out now, because we had this national organization. We had this students in all the high schools in East LA. So we felt that it was time. It was time to walk out. So what happened was, as soon as Wilson walked out in 1968, this was just at the end of April. It's March?
No, March.
March
1st.
Yeah, okay. When Wilson walked out, that's when that gave us a signal that no, the students are ready. They walked out because they had a play and they were turned down to do the play, and so they walked. So they walked out of Wilson. So I said, well, it must be time. You know, I talked to Joe Rosso once again, back again on the consensus. I talked to Joe Rosso and several other Brown Berets. I said, should we go ahead and move the walkout to take place, because it was hot. It was spontaneous. You know, so since it was a spontaneous feeling for the students to walk out, since we were Brown Berets, we just had to go ahead and give the order and make the decision. And that's what I was good at mostly when things were tough and things were rough. When somebody had to make a decision with consensus, I would make a lot of decisions to make things happen. Because that's why I was there. I mean, I was the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has chapters, okay, has groups, has organizations. What does the Prime Minister do? Sit on his butt? No, the Prime Minister makes decisions to make action. And that's what we would do over and over again. We would make action. You know, back in the walkouts, some of the events during the moratoriums, the occupation of Catalina Island, the caravanas, some of the marches. So action after action after action. That's what the Brown Berets were about. Okay. Anyway, there's just so much history to cover, and I really could not cover it right now, even in an hour or two. I think I was covered during an 11th hour period. I mean, I talked to Virginia Espino, and she interviewed me for like 12 hours right under the lab on the Brown Beret history, because there's so much involved. And you can see that through UCLA oral history. The information is in there. And you can also see the information on these books here for $20, forwarded by Dr. Armando Morales from UCLA. He helped me to publish these books. And before Dr. Armando Morales died, he told me to try to get these books out to the people. Don't charge too much. So I'm only charging $20 for these books. Anyway, I just like to say that before I go on, that it took a lot of sacrifice and a lot of know-how and a lot of administration. A lot of people think, oh, brown berets, you go out there, be brown. No, there was administration involved. There was management involved. Okay, that's where I would come from. Money had to be raised. You know, I had to raise the money for the events and for the organization. Telephone calls cost a lot. We used to run up telephone bills, unbelievable. Cost money, you know. So I was always raising money, and I was always organizing, and always traveling, organizing chapters. You know, so that was a lot of work, a lot of stress. I don't know how I did it. Maybe I don't know, but I did it. You know, and with help with people like Ralph Ramirez, you know, who was out there dealing and organizing the national organizations. We had the East LA chapter, but we also had to deal with the national organization and the national picture of making things happen and making things occur. Okay, thank you.
Is this working here?
Yes.
Okay. So what we'd like to do actually is we have Ralph Ramirez here and Carlos Montes. I wanted to ask both of you, and David kind of anticipated the question a little bit in talking about what led up to the Berets, because we're focusing primarily on the founding of the organization here. So I guess the question I have for Ralph is who was Ralph Ramirez before he was a brown beret? And I'll ask you the same question, Carlos. And then I have a question for you after. So,
well, like David said, we're in the neighborhood. We're at Hollenbeck Junior High, Stevenson Junior High, Roosevelt High School, Garfield, and these other institutions. And we know, we're not stupid. We know that we're getting the short end of the stick. 60-70% of us are dropping out, and we know on the other side of the town in West Los Angeles it's totally different. Those people are going to they were going to institutions like this one right here. Well, we were lucky if we could make it to East Los Angeles College. Most of us couldn't even do that. And then also the issues with law enforcement. Those were the two things that most concerned me at the time: education and law enforcement. We knew that there was no rule of law in East Los Angeles. We might as well have been living in some uncivilized country. So we got together to make an attempt to change that, because we had seen that generations before us, they tried, but then for various reasons they failed.
Sorry, somebody unplugged these, and I don't know why. Give me a minute to reset that.
no problem. We have technical difficulties.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hi.
You still there?
Hi.
Go ahead, Mila. Or Ralph.
Back
Are we good?
In a second.
Oh, just a second.
Photo op over here.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
We're good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the question I had originally asked was who was Ralph Ramirez prior to becoming a brown beret? I guess I and obviously continue however you wish, but I also wonder too, what brought you to the movement as an individual?
Well, those conditions that I had just enumerated.
Right.
These conditions that I was affected by personally, my family was affected by, my neighbors, everybody around me, my classmates. And we're all in this hole, so to speak, and we have to figure out a way to climb out of that hole.
Why did you feel the Brown Berets particularly was the type of organization that would be able to address these issues?
Well, basically, we were looking at the shortest distance between 2 points as a straight line. Let's just get to it and dispense with all the rhetoric, all the philosophies, all these theories, and let's just get to the point and let's just get it done. We have a job to do. Let's figure out the most direct way, the quickest way to accomplish that.
Okay, the same question for you, Carlos. Who was Carlos Montes before he became a Brown Beret?
Well, yeah, I grew up cruising the Boulevard, East LA. I went to Garfield, right?
But you know, my parents brought me from Juarez to South LA as a little kid. So I grew up in South LA with the soul sound. Then we moved to Ball Heights and East LA. So I grew up, you know, cruising, getting harassed by the sheriffs, just like, you know, Ralph and David mentioned. I barely graduated out of Garfield, barely, man. You know, I almost dropped out. And then I got a job at a factory downtown with my dad, assembly line, and I go, man, it's hot, dusty, man, let's go to East LA College. So I barely got into ELAC, right? But then, you know, like we needed a job. I got a job as a team post director in Lincoln Heights. That's how I met Father Luz in El Risco, and then hooked up with the Young Chicano for Community Action and La Piranha Coffee House, right? So I was just a young, you know, guy from Juarez, growing up in South LA. I said, what the hell's going on, right? But you know, I got humiliated in high school because of my accent, because I didn't speak English right, and you know, I try to identify my identity. You know, during St. Patrick's Day at Garfield, they make a big thing about it, and I go, well, wait a minute, we're Aztecs, right? And then the teacher made fun of me, like, oh, you're an Aztec, you know. So a lot of experiences, you know, but the cops really radicalized me, right? So then, you know, so when I hooked up with La Raza newspaper, with El Risco bringing it to the team post on Main Street, then I started going to the Piranha Coffee House and became part of the Brown Berets, right? The other thing that radicalized me though was the homies, the people I went to high school getting drafted and killed. So I'll stop there because I know you probably have more questions, right?
No, I mean, you can, if you got a few
minutes. Okay, well, yeah, so then, you know, the thing with the Brown Berets, the way I see it is that we were different from the 50th generation, the LULAC, the CSO era. We were saying, because they wanted to assimilate, they wanted to say we're white, we want to work within the system. We said, Charlie, man, we're not white, we're brown, we're indigenous, we're Chicano, and we want revolution eventually. You know, we wanted better housing, stop police brutality here, right? Because, you know, I was in the jail at East LA Sheriff, you know, when I was in high school. I got busted for DTA, but I didn't do it, I was found not guilty. So we became radicalized to say we want Chicano power and self-determination. The thing that radicalized me, a little kid from Juarez, is the homies coming from Vietnam in boxes, us getting beat up, you know, going to the Poor People's Campaign. We spent a couple of months over there, right, Ralph, getting busted, the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference. So it made us, you know, go from assimilation to self-determination, to our own nation, the Chicano nation of Aztlán, Plan Espiritual de Aztlán at the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference. And I still believe that. I believe that we're an oppressed nation within the Southwest. We have the right to self-determination. And then, you know, the world events, you know, the Mexican students in Mexico in '68, you know, the revolutionary movements in Cuba and Bolivia, all over the world, to me, it opened up my mind and said, this is a worldwide struggle, not just here, us in East LA. We got to fight for the free clinic, stop police brutality, right? But we got to support the Vietnamese people, right, to self-determination, because my homies were coming back either, you know, using drugs or in boxes, you know.
Thank you. Okay, Rona, you've been waiting patiently. So I mean, I'll ask you first to contextualize. I know you wanted to say something earlier, so if you'd like to contextualize the organization as a scholar, then I have a follow-up question for you.
Okay. Well, let me say that I came into the scene at La Piranha Coffee House. I was teaching part-time at Cal State LA and at Pasadena City College, and I had been working as a psychologist in the most segregated town in California, Monrovia, California. And I became very aware of how the schools treated Chicano children. I felt that what I was hearing, and La Piranha was a wonderful gateway to the world. The world could come in and meet and greet and find out who Chicanos were. And for Chicanos, they could see who was interested in them and what else they had to offer. So it was a terrific idea, and it was a terrific execution of the idea. But what I felt was most significant, why this group of adolescent young adults at that stage of development, everybody is looking for their identity, and they're looking for a proud identity. And one of the things that had happened at that time was Reyes Tijerina's takeover of the Tierra Amarillo county office, and making the point about the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, which really stated very clearly that these were not wetbacks, these were not immigrants, these were not documented or undocumented. According to that treaty, anyone who was from Mexico, anyone who was from that part of the United States, the southwestern part, that was part of the Louisiana Purchase, they were free of boundaries. And the boundaries included no boundaries on language, Spanish and English, and they could move back and forth across, no borders. This gave an impetus to one of the most serious crimes against Mexican Americans that had taken place all over the Southwest when the treaty was tossed in a wastebasket. Some of the Brown Berets actually were descendants of families who'd had land grants from the King of Spain. Well, that's a pretty proud identity, except that the King of Spain didn't own the land; it belonged to the American Indians, and he swiped it from them. But it became part of the American process, not a proud part of it. So they had an identity, they had a history, they had a sense of who they were and what their rights were, and this was critically important. Then there were a couple of other things that were critically important and are critically important in that stage of development. You have to excuse me, I'm a psychologist and sociologist, sometimes an anthropologist, but I think of things that way. The other thing that is important at that stage of development is a sense of moral justice. Now, normally, children who are 12 to 16 are stuck in a stage of vendetta. And this I found examples of in Northern Ireland and Africa and all over the world, the other places that I've studied, the other books that I've written. But what I found amongst this group was that they had moved from the stage of vendetta to the stage of universal social justice. It's amazing that they did it because they hadn't been admitted to the major institutions of this society. They didn't have a piece of it, but they were determined to get a piece of it. They were determined to make these institutions for themselves and for others like themselves. This was one of the really remarkable kinds of psychological and social aspects of this group of young people. So I knew they were winners right from the start. They were not going to be gang members. They were going to be constructive activist citizens, if you want to call it that, but they were going to be making their society. So some of the things that we engaged in together were in the system of justice. David used to say, justice here means just us, meaning them. But it became a very critical issue, not only because of the police harassment and all of the other kinds of harassment, but because it was to establish the legal entity of the Chicano. And one of the injustices was that you couldn't be tried by a jury of your peers if you were a Chicano in California, of all places. And it happened because of the trial of a young Brown Beret, and I was called in on that. I was already involved with the movement. I was called in on that by a couple of really wonderful constitutional lawyers, David Finkel and Neil Herring. And the original idea was that I was going to talk about diminished capacity and the fact that this young man had not had the opportunities to learn in school, and his parents had been taken away by the immigration authorities when he was a little kid, and he and his siblings were left alone in the house while the parents were taken to Mexico, and it was several years before the family got back together. So he had some feelings about people who were wearing uniforms and coming at him. Anyway, that was supposed to be the thing. And I started looking at the composition of the jury and discovered that there were no Chicanos on the jury. There were no blacks on the jury. How come? Discovered that there was a test used for jury selection that was standardized on undergraduates at the University of Southern California. Very unlikely that there would be a Chicano on the jury. Very unlikely that anyone on the jury would understand what a Chicano was about or anything like that. So that required another series of hearings, and fortunately the judge questioned me up and down about standardization of tests, etc. And I knew I had my homework. And the law for the selection of jurors by tests that were standardized on undergraduates at USC, the procedure was totally thrown out. And one of the wonderful things that happened out of that was that finally there could be a jury of peers. One of the not so great things that came out of it was the O.J. Simpson trial. But you see, law goes beyond the incidentals. So that was one of the things. Another thing was that children in the Chicano community often didn't start school at 6 because they were asked for papers, birth certificates. And many parents were afraid to produce anything that showed that they had been born, in Mexico. I started reading the law about school attendance, and California was admitted as a state on the basis that every child 6 or over would be educated free in the public schools of California. And I said, hey, wait a minute. So I lived in Pasadena City School System at the time, Altadena, and I was able to persuade one mother to let me bring her children to the school. She was afraid to do that herself. And I said, they're 6 years old, the same school my kids were going to. And I said, they're six years old, one was 7, and they belong in school. And they said, what proof have you? And I said, I'm a psychologist, and I've examined them, and I know them, and I know that they're functioning at the level of 6 and 7-year-olds. And I believe that they were born 6 and 7 years before. Okay, they had to accept it, all right? So, parents no longer had to be afraid that their status would be challenged if they brought their kids to school. It's a very important point. And finally, one of the things that was really disastrous in East Los Angeles wasn't all poverty. These were people who were struggling very hard with several jobs to make it, to own a car, to have a piece of a house, to have something of theirs. But that excluded them from the public health services because they had some property, okay? The other thing that excluded them from public health services, they didn't have insurance. They couldn't go to private health services. Kids weren't getting vaccinated, again, because they weren't going to school, etc. So one of the really great things I think that the Brown Berets did was start a free clinic in East Los Angeles, the Brown Beret East Los Angeles Free Clinic. It was the first free clinic started by a paramilitary organization, and it became not just the Brown Berets, but shortly after it was founded, within 6 months, 8 months of its founding, there was a community board. They had people from the community who were running the show. I thought that was really significant because they were developing an institution not just exclusively for members, not just exclusively for people of particular income group or lack of income group, but open to all Chicanos who needed health care. And they did it by cooperative work with physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, surgeons, and they did it with money that they raised themselves. They got an old beat up clinical office and posted posters over the holes, got donations of equipment. This was the development, institution building, and that's much more significant than people have mentioned about it. The identity and the identity leading to the building of institutions that met the needs of that identity group. Basically, that's what my dissertation was about, because I found this an extraordinary group of people. I think now, in retrospect, one of the things that you hear a great deal about is how the Great Society programs didn't work. They were all a bust. They were all, just a waste of money. Well, if you figure that it was Great Society program money that funded some of the basics that became Brown Beret programs and institutions, I think that the whole country got a lot more human capital out of the investment than ever they could calculate. Every single one of the organizers of Brown Berets became successful professionals, became business executives, became social workers, became teachers, became psychologists, became writers. That's a kind of human capital that you can't begin to calculate in dollars and cents. And so I feel that this was a very successful program, and its success was impeded often by the very systems that were set up to provide justice and equal opportunities. The police, the sheriff's department, the federal government investigative institutions. There was one after another effort in entrapment, one after another police roundup, jailing, putting a limit on, in fact, barring media attention, barring the media from coverage, and we got through. And this is what was so significant. It didn't get through by holding a gun to anybody's head. We got through by using whatever levers there were in the institutions that could be pushed and pulled and sat on or marched on. And it proved one thing, I feel, if you pardon me for being patriotic a little bit, but we have a constitution that's amenable to change. Racism was incorporated, but a Supreme Court was able to outlaw it. So this is something that the Brown Berets, the Chicano movement, learned to use, and use well and very effectively. So I'm proud of these now grandfathers, formerly young adults and adolescents, who I met in a coffee shop and who spent a lot of time at my house in Altadena on R&R and doing fundraising events, including the first performance of Teatro Campesino, the organization of the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, which became MALDEF. This was all institution building. And it has all been a beautiful outcome of the hard work and the inspiration that these young people put into their lives and into their community. So I'm really proud today to be able to talk about some of my favorite people in the world, the ones who made me able to believe that change is possible and that young people can change the world and shape it when they have an inspiration and a positive identity. That's all.
All right, Rona. All right, Rona, that was great.
Okay, so the next question I have for all of you in thinking about the founding of the organization, there were a couple of things. One in the 10-point platform that originally was written, and I think it was point number one, essentially, and to paraphrase it, it didn't matter who you were, what kind of income you had, what your politics were, your political philosophy was, but that we need to organize on the basis of cultural nationalism. And so the organization itself is considered a cultural nationalist organization. I'd like you all to speak to that, and also what that means and what that meant, and also actually we'll go ahead and I'm blanking on the second part of it. The quote that every Mexican American is potentially a Chicano as well was something that was often sort of espoused in the documents. So how to approach people and to talk to people to sort of convert them, if you will, to the message of the movement. I'd like you all to speak to those topics in particular, if you will. And whoever wants to go first. Or,
Is your offering before it, Ralph?
yeah. Oh, we were going to have you all
okay.
speak. Yeah. You want
Well, as far as every Mexican American being a potential Chicano, that's the hope we had. So we had to operate on a basis of hope and in optimism, even though, many times we found out that, we faced a lot of obstacles there because we had people calling themselves Spaniards and Hispanic and, well, not Latinos. Then it was even worse than Latinos. It was Latins in those days. I think some of the audience probably remembers that. And I remember one time in El Sereno, this was one of our activities when we were still the YCCA, and we were on a food drive to assist Cesar Chavez in the UFW. So we're going door to door, and this Chicano pulls a .38 Smith & Wesson on me. he calls me a communist. He said, he's proud to be a white guy and whatever, And I said, well, all right, sir, I'm trying to back my way off his porch and get out of there. And so these are kind of, that's just one example. Maybe it was naive to assume that every Mexican American was a potential Chicano, but we, at that time, we're 17, 18, 19 years old. So we're looking at the world pretty optimistically. So that's the basis that we proceeded on, and we were successful in many cases.
Well, like I said earlier, that the older generation wanted to assimilate and become white, and we said, no, we're not white. So we got a lot of resistance on that. That we rejected being white, and we didn't want to assimilate or integrate. We wanted self-determination, Chicano power. And, so like as Rona pointed out, and we took an issue of pride. The reason the parade was brown is because brown pride and rejecting racism. And however, I will say that most of us were working class and poor working class. I mean, my father worked at an assembly line factory in South LA. And my mother worked at a nuts and bolt packing company, right? And when they went on strike, we'd have to go pick it down in not pick it, but we'll pick vegetables down in the South Bay area. So, we would organize anyone who we thought would win over to the Chicano power movement, but there was the upper class, that didn't want us, that said, that you guys are, when we did the protest at the East LA Sheriff's Station, we got a lot of slacks, a lot of hassle, and the local newspaper, I remember saying, you guys are outsiders, you're communists, you're marijuanos, and I said, wait a minute, man, we grew up here, we live here, we're not communists, but later on, I became one, right? I was open to socialism. We smoked a little weed, but we were anti-drugs at the time, right? So we had an anti-drug policy later on, right? So I would say we're mostly working class. We would try to unite everyone, whether you're upper or lower class. And I think the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference was an example. We had different people, because that were business people, but mostly working class.
Yeah, I think Edna said that in the Brown Berets, had all kinds of people in there. It wasn't just one kind of person. It was all kinds of people. And I think that was the thing to accept. Even if somebody come out of prison, if he had a good mind and a good heart, and we'd accept him into the organization. Or even graduates getting their master's degree, if they had a good heart, good mind, they would join the organization. So the organization was made of many kinds. We had teachers. We had made of many kinds of people. I think, and the policy, I think administration-wise, we did have like a 10-point program, but that kind of gave us a way or a means to stay on the same page. Now, we were an issues organization. I think that's something that a lot of organizations don't have today, is they don't focus on issues. And that's what rallies the people, are issues. And that's kind of like policy. In this book, we had a lot of policy here. 1972, the Brown Beret policies, where we talk about organizing and keeping on the same page. And I think that's one of the problems today, is that everybody goes on different pages. But I think looking at back in then, I mean, Dr. Rona Fields, she came on and she was a supporter, and we had a lot of Jewish attorneys. I mean, he had 10 cases, I had 10 cases, he had 10 court cases. But we beat most of our cases. One time I did 40 days though, because I called a policeman. We were demonstrating on Whittier Boulevard. I called a sheriff a pig, and I didn't know he was a lieutenant and sheriff, right? Anyway, he got me. He set me up. I went to jail for 40 days for disturbing the peace. But we had Jewish attorneys. We had support. We had institutions backing us up. We had programs. There were a lot of programs. A lot of people don't know about institutions backing up the Chicano movement, backing up the Brown Berets. Once, for example, in the very beginning of the Brown Berets, we would have a meeting where we bring in different people from different agencies and people from the community, and they were like a support group. So we had the institutions, and most of those institutions and programs have been wiped out. So that's what makes it so difficult to get the word across. But we did have some policy.
Before we continue, I want to acknowledge Cruz Omeda Maceda. I think he's here. Maybe he can stand up. He was also a member of the organization as All right, cool. There he is. I don't know if you'd like to come up and maybe say a few words. Yeah, I think if you want to come up and say a few words, I think that would be great. Not to put you on the spot.
In the beginning, right?
I guess, I could ask you the question as well, and you can sit here. Introductions.
How you doing?
What brought you to the organization, to the Brown Beret organization? Go ahead.
Sure. Okay, I was radicalized while I was in the Navy. I was serving overseas in Vietnam, and because of some of the things that we did, that I saw us doing, I got really upset. And so I just started reading, and while I was in the Navy, overseas I became anti-war, I became a socialist, I became, I would say, anti-imperialist, because I was reading books that explained colonialism, neocolonialism, things like that. And also I was reading stuff about the civil rights movement of African Americans, and I started seeing that it was the same struggle, whether it was overseas or here, it was the same struggle, same enemy in a sense. And then I came back and I couldn't talk to anybody because first I was angry, and then people didn't understand what I was saying. And then in 1967, I was at a hot dog stand on Soto and Wabash, waiting for an order, and I see this magazine, it's called La Raza. And so I open it up and I start reading it. And I start reading the articles, and the first thing that comes to my mind is, I'm not crazy, Other people think the same way. And so I called them up, and because there was a phone number there in the newspaper, and the person I talked to was Chicho Jimenez, and he said, look, what you have to do is you have to go to the Piranha Coffee House. There are young people there who think like you, and so I went, and I met these guys here. I met David. First talk I had with David, he explained to me why the name had been changed from Young Citizens for Community Action to Young Chicanos for Community Action. We were not the Brown Berets yet, we were still Young Chicanos for Community Action. And later we became the Brown Berets. One of the things that was touched on here about, what David wrote about how every Mexican American is a potential Chicano, that was very, very important. That was like at the heart, I think, of what we were doing. Talking to one of the other founders who passed away since then was Johnny Parsons. And Johnny Parsons said, one of the things that we have to do is we have to make this polarization between the Mexican American and what it is to be a Chicano. And at the time, to put it into context of that time, to be a Mexican American, when people call themselves that, they're basically to be middle class and to be tailing behind, say, the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. And that was like a career thing for a lot of the politicians. And we wanted to make a break with that. Ralph talked about that, the short distance between 2 points. We had to make that break. And so that consciousness, that national consciousness became very, very important. You were not going to get that calling yourself a Mexican American, and so that symbol of the brown beret, the bush jackets that we wore, that was a break. And yes, we got some of those ideas, like David was saying, from the student movement, because the student movement was also very radical at the time. But in the community, the first organization that would come out with that militant stance was going to be the Brown Berets. And it was also very important because then that became like a tie between the students on the campuses and the Brown Berets through the walkouts. That's when the students were on the campuses were finally, because they had talked about the needs in the community, they wanted to hook up with the community, the walkouts became the vehicle for that to take place. And anyway, that's it.
Maybe I'll moderate from up there. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Rona, or Rona is Rona. Maybe I don't. Okay. Okay. Well, we'll go on with another question. So, I guess another question that I had for all of you is sort of thinking about the larger context, right? You're not just part of the Chicano movement. but you're part of the 1960s and the 1970s, and there's a lot going on outside of just the Mexican American or Chicano community. What other influences that did you all have? And I know you just mentioned the African American movement a little bit, civil rights movement, but who influenced you in terms of how you decide to proceed with events and plan, certain. What am I playing? Totally blanking out. Plan certain protests or target certain institutions. Who were your larger influences?
Well, you build on that, you're right. The African American movement did make a big impact on me. Like I said, I grew up in South LA, Miramonte Elementary School, but then I went to Hollenbeck, right? So I was a janitor during the Watts riots at Ford Elementary School, and so I was working at that time with blacks. And I remember during the Watts riots, what year was it, 65? Was it?
65.
Okay, so I was still in high school at Garfield. I was a janitor, and the two or three African Americans that would argue about the riots, and I was in the middle of it. One of them was saying, "Burn, baby, burn! I'm out there in the night taking it all," and I listened to the guy. And then the other guy would say, "No, we shouldn't do that," So I was, and I grew up in South LA. My family was from a little ranchito in Mexico, down in 76th and Compton, Florencia, and across the street were all these families from Louisiana. From the rural area. So I grew up with blacks and the soul music, right? So later on, when the on TV, not only the Watts Rebellion, but also the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X. So when I went to ELAC, I went to a meeting of the Mexican American Student Association. Al Juarez, the older Chicano veterans had gone to college in the GI Bill, right? And then I started telling them, man, we got to be like the blacks. All you ought to do is tutoring and scholarship dances, and come on, man, we got to be like the blacks. Like, look what they're doing, they're rebelling. And then they told me, you know what? Why don't you go do that? And that's why, with the Piranha Coffee House and the Brown Berets, like, okay, I will. And we started a different group. But the other part of it was the Black Panthers. We had a working relationship. Bunchy Carter and John Huggins came to the Piranha Coffee House, and they were killed here at UCLA in 68 or 9, right? And they gave me the red book, and I said, "What's this? Mao Zedong. All right, let's read it." Bobby Seale, they would give us the red books. We started reading it. We make jokes about Mousy, remember? But I started reading it. I said, okay, this sounds good. So from a cultural nationalist saying that white people are the enemy, I myself became more over to socialism, that capitalism is the enemy. So I would say the Black Liberation Movement, the Vietnamese struggle, when I started learning about Vietnam and what they were doing, I said, if they're defeating the U.S. imperial power and they want socialism, it can't be that bad, So and then the worldwide events in Mexico, what happened in Mexico. 68 was a crazy year. They killed King, because King had wanted us to be in the Poor People's Campaign, remember? He wanted the militant Mexicans, and he got killed. But Abernathy and the more middle class blacks, like Jesse, didn't want the militant Mexicans, right? So that was the first Rainbow Coalition. So I would say all of that experience, I would say the Cuban Revolution, my parents were always, son comunistas, pero But my parents, my abuelito was in the Mexican Revolution. So all of that put together, I think, influences all our life experience.
Well, my experience is a little different. I think, and there was, one of the conflicts with the Brown Berets over the years has been between the progressives, who want reform and the socialists who want to change the whole world. And so, it's still that problem, But my problem was public relations. I'm over here trying to do public relations, trying to win 100% of the community, and then Carlos and some of the other guys are saying, "Hey, we're socialists." And no, we're not. So we're not all socialists, And so the people that, for example, the people that ended up with the Brown Beret Free Clinic, who ended up with it? Ultimate, they're a multi-million-dollar organization. And they said they took the clinic away from the Brown Berets because they were communists. Well, we weren't all socialists, right? Anyway, so the Brown Berets had different kinds of people. It would make some socialists, every little bit of everything, We even had a couple of Muslims in there, Brown Berets. You know, but it was a combination of all kinds of people, and I think that's one of the things, the great things about the Brown Berets, that we accepted everybody to do a mission. Okay, so first was the mission, everything else was second. The mission was first, and the mission was better schools, better education, better jobs. You know, that was the main mission. You know, and of course, the other people had visionary things. They want to change the whole system. I didn't think it was possible to change the whole system, but I did see, felt that it was possible. And even today, I felt that we need to go to another level, which is the political level. And anyway, that's why I'm running for Congress. Okay, Ralph, you want to say something?
I think we have to give props to Reyes Tijerina and the land grant movement in New Mexico.
Yes.
Which, the courthouse
Yes.
raid took place on June the 5th, 1967. And when we heard about this in East Los Angeles, it was just it was just mind-boggling. It was something unbelievable. And even a lot of the black activists in Los Angeles were saying, they admitted that they were talking about revolution. But this Reyes Tijerina cat, he was making revolution. And then shortly after that, within 2 or 3 months, he came to California, and you know, through the hospitality of Father Luz at the Church of the Epiphany, he you know, he stayed there while he completed his Southern California tour. And then we got to talk with him. We even got to sleep there in the rectory building with him as bodyguards. And Cruz and myself even managed, I think they made a poster out of it somewhere along the line, right? Yeah, we're in a picture with him. So, but he was a really big influence on us.
We went, we traveled with him in the mountains in New Mexico, remember?
Well, I don't want to say too much about
Well,
that.
no.
Hey, Carlos.
You're right, I forgot to mention that big influence. He said he wanted the land.
Hey, you know the federal government has pushed through ex post facto laws, right? So.
What does that mean? They can still get it?
Something like that.
Tradition.
Yeah. No, but we were on the ground in northern New Mexico with Reyes Tijerina and right there in Tierra Maria. Matter of fact, the courthouse, the old courthouse, still had the bullet holes there. As a matter of fact, they're probably still there to this day. And so we were able to see right there on the ground how Reyes was organizing. And I remember one time we got pulled over by the New Mexico State Police. They were all Chicanos, and they were almost like apologizing to Reyes for pulling him over. You know, like they approached him, Señor Tijerina, perdónanos, you know, but we got to do this. And yeah, we're looking at this and go, wow, these cops are scared to death of this man. And it really made quite an impression on us.
You were carrying your 38 Super.
Hey, come on, man.
That was 40 years ago, man. That was 40 years ago.
More than 40 years ago.
More than 40 years ago, right?
Yes. I was driving you all around in my car at the time.
Oh yeah, we used to borrow your car and never give it back.
Well, no, when we were taking him around to the different events in the Los Angeles area, and I was the one with the driver's license and the car. So I went to those events, and one of the things that really impressed me about all of that was I think it was a party in Sherman Oaks, and there were people there who I'd met at other parties, actually, because at the time I had a very wide variety of contacts. Anyway, the point was that I came in with the Brown Berets, and I sat down, and I realized that these people who I'd met before thought I was a Chicana and part of the Brown Berets. And I was smoking little cigars at the time. And they said, "Oh, that's very Hispanic, isn't it?" It's very bad for my lungs. but I felt like they were casting me in a particular role, and it was very enlightening, because I saw that these were liberal people, these were progressive people, but they had an idea of what a Mexican American was. And my surround was determining my identity. Blonde and blue-eyed, the police thought I was a Chicana because that's where I was. This gave me another insight into the kind of stereotyping that goes on in the middle-class progressive community. And I think it was an important insight because it followed all the way through. No matter what the Brown Berets did, the media stereotyped, except for Ruben Salazar. He was the only one who recognized the same thing I saw, and he got killed for it.
Thank you, Rona. I appreciate it. What we want to do now is open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask any of the panelists or Rona, then we already see some hands. So go ahead, Rosalie.
Yeah, how do you see the role of women in the development of the Brown Berets?
Oh, you know, I wrote a whole chapter on that in my dissertation. One of the things that impressed me about the group was that there were women in the group, and some of them were clearly equals and committed. One of them was a 14-year-old girl who happened to be David's younger sister, and she seemed to me to be the model of the non-sexualized, committed young Chicana. Unfortunately, there were, as there always are in these groups, there were girls who were hangers-on, who were looking for a boyfriend, and there were some who were ideologues and trying to, just as there were some male ideologues, and trying to commit this group to their idealized images, not who they were. But it was, at its inception, an equal opportunity, non-sexist group. And I was always treated by the people in that group not as a white lady, okay? Not even as a white lady professor. I was their equal, and I think one of the proudest certificates I have of all of the certificates and accomplishments I've been certified for was a certificate from the Brown Berets that I was a resource person. I was given the title of resource person. And, you know, I look at that today and it almost brings tears to my eyes, because my next stop after California was having taken a job as an associate professor at Clark University in Massachusetts. I was so impressed with, I was going to teach women's studies, I was going to teach Irish studies, I was going to teach social psychology. And it was an Ivy League school. And the first thing I realized when I hit the campus was that these were not the students I'd had at Cal State LA or Pasadena City College. These were not serious students. These were not people who were really aware of the world. And it was a very sad day for me, because I realized what I'd lost by leaving California, leaving the Brown Berets, leaving the Chicano community. And of course it went on to, I was one of the first women associate professors there, and filed an EEO complaint that wound up at the Supreme Court 20 some years later. But, you know, where I saw a non-sexist society was in the Brown Beret group. And it was a remarkable experience. And I can't thank you all enough for that.
Do any of the panelists want to comment on the question or talk about the question? Rosalio asked what the role of women.
No, I think the role of the women were more of a, I say, supportive role than most of the guys. The guys, we were in the front all the time. You know, we were always in the front taking the hits from the police, and even Louis, what's his name? Luis Carrillo. Yeah, Luis Carrillo. I saw him. He was at a demonstration here at UCLA, and on television said I saw 2 cops chasing him and beating him over the head because he was wearing a brown beret. I mean, so what I'm trying to say is the women were not out there to get their heads knocked in like the guys were, you know. And I think during those times it was kind of like, it was seen like that, you know. You guys go out there to the front line, you know. And the women were supportive there. They were supportive of the men, and we couldn't have done it without the women, you know, because they were behind. They were supporting us, you know, and they would do other things, you know, whatever help they could do. They would help us organize people. They would handle the headquarters, the phone. They would handle the free clinic, the medical free clinic that we had. You know, they did a lot of things, public relations for us. You know, and the guys, of course, most of the guys weren't always in the front line, and that was just a matter of decision. I think that's one of the things that people don't know about the Brown Berets was it was a decision. You know, if you wanted to take a chance, you could take a chance. You know, but if your chance went too far, well, we'll try to get you a lawyer. But you know, at one point or other, you know, you got to be careful. You know, and so, but the women were very supportive. But once again, like I said, the Brown Berets was not a democratic organization. It was mission, purpose, organization. The mission and the purpose came first. We knew all. It was like a team, like a football team. You know, the women supported the men, and we were all out there, you know, to back up the movement, and that was the main thing. The women were there for the school walkouts. Okay, the women were there for the moratoriums. The women were there for the occupation of Catalina Island. The women were there for us all the way through, and we couldn't have done it without the women.
Agustin Cebada?
Just real quick, no, you're right. The women played a key role in making sure the Brown Berets were able to move forward. You know, you already said it all. I mean, the big thing was the free clinic too. You know, Gloria and the woman, they basically ran it. You know, and a lot of times, you know, the guys would take credit. You know, we were the speakers at the rallies, etc. But the women were the brick and mortar of the organization. We all were together, but if it wasn't for the women, I think we wouldn't have been as successful. Yeah.
Actually, I think
you want to moderate
yes.
with a lot of hands.
No, actually, I think I need to just also add a different scope and perspective to this. You know, the fact is that the women at one point broke from the organization, complaining that the organization was in fact a sexist organization, and they weren't necessarily, you know, they didn't feel that their needs or their voices were being heard. And this isn't just something that happened in the East LA chapter. This is something that happened in Brown Beret chapters across the country. Many of the women went on to start other organizations. Susana Almanza in Texas, for example, started La Chicana organization. So the Berets, in a way, played a role to sort of politicize the community as a whole. And many women had access through that, in becoming involved in it. But then as their own consciousness sort of evolved, and as the women's movement becomes stronger and stronger, it begins to sort of create tension within the organization, and men weren't necessarily responding to it in the way that they should have been. So I think that I would be remiss as a scholar without mentioning that or saying that, because this is something that happens repeatedly in organization after organization, as far as the gender relationships. Two of the major issues on points of division with respect to the decline of the organization is in fact these splits along gender lines, and in addition, the constant police presence, I mean, and the constant police surveillance, the role of the FBI and the role of local police, there's secret service files on the organization. So these two things, these sorts of emergencies and the sort of evolving consciousness among women within the organization also, was part of this. So I think, as responsibly speaking, I think I need to say that, just having interviewed many and many of women that have been part of the organization, but many of them did go on to do other things, and I think it was a stepping stone in many ways to continue their own action and activity through the movement. But anyhow, we have some other hands up.
Wait, I'd like to answer that.
Someone's over here in the front.
Could I talk about the?
Wait, can I just answer that?
Actually, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm gonna moderate this, and so if you don't mind, there are other hands up. There are other hands up, so I'm gonna go ahead and moderate this.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and answer that question.
Oh, go ahead, Cruz.
Okay.
Which one? Which one?
The one you just raised about the women.
Oh.
Okay, David talked about, you mentioned when he did the 40 days in jail, and he was arrested on Twitter Boulevard.
Yeah, for the rally.
No, we were arrested together.
Yeah.
We were both on Wayside together. And that night, my sister, who was a Brown Beret, just like his sister was, really got upset behind that arrest. And so, she just went right back on Whittier Boulevard with bottles and just started smashing windows up and down Whittier Boulevard, together with somebody who's sitting up here, Carlos Montes. So
I'll admit to it. 50 years
so,
later.
so like David was saying, if the sisters want to get out there in the front and do it, they did it. Nothing held them back. But I had to say that because I don't want anybody to have the impression that women did get out there and do any fighting. They did.
Just real quick, if somebody puts some light into the parallels and the influences that the Black Panthers played to the Brown Berets, being that they were both around the same time.
No, I would just like to say that one of the reasons why we used to communicate with the Black Panthers is we wanted to see what they were going through, so we would not go through the same thing. But also to avoid arrest. I even took a class in police science, to try to learn how to avoid arrest. And I learned, as long as you avoid evidence, you're okay. And so that's what I learned. And I try to teach other people to avoid, getting caught to the point of getting trapped. Because over and over again they were trapped. But one thing about the Black Panther movement was they were out there. They were fulfilling. They were the vanguard of the Black Civil Rights movement. And the problem was that the Chicano community, La Raza, we did not have a vanguard. And so therefore, there was a need to fulfill that void to create a vanguard, and we were the vanguard of the Mexican-American Chicano Civil Rights Movement.
Can I just say that real quick on the blacks? We had a good working relationship because Elbridge Cleaver grew up in Rose Hill, East LA. So when we got out of the joint, we had people that were in the joint that would go meet with them. We met Bobby Seale. We were at the Free Huey Newton rally at the sports arena where Tijerina was the best speaker. So you're right, we wanted to, they were getting killed and raided and assassinated, right? So we wanted to avoid that, but there was that solidarity, but we promoted black and brown unity, even though there were some dudes in the neighborhood who were anti-black, we had to educate them. And then when we would go to South LA, the Panther offices, there were some blacks that were anti-Mexican, right? And they would put them on check. Did you want to say something?
Well, go ahead.
No, I'm finished.
Yeah, I'll cede some time to Augustine Cebada.
Okay.
My question is, and a comment, it's, the formation of the Chicano Moratorium and its impact on the rest of the people in the so-called progressive movements. As you know, the moratorium, Chicano Moratorium, August 29th is historically the largest anti-war movement that's ever taken place in Southern California. How did the formation of it come about?
What was the first one? You want to talk about it? What was the first
Okay,
one?
yeah.
December
It was
69.
basically where the Brown Berets wanted to expand the movement, and we realized that everybody did not want to become a Brown Beret. So therefore, we had the power to organize a second movement within the movement, and it was the Chicano Moratorium. I became the first chairman of the Moratorium Committee. Ralph Ramirez, of course, helped me organize. Ralph Ramirez has not been heard. I hope he can come up and speak. But Ralph Ramirez was one of the most dedicated people out there organizing and keeping things going. And so I think Ralph Ramirez is a very important person. But once again, you know, over and over again, everybody tries to give the credit of the movement to other people, that other people did this, and Paula Christostom organized it, which was only in the movie, right? No, it was organized by these people up here, by the Brown Berets, and as once again, as I was Prime Minister, I did have the power to make the moratorium committee begin and start by organizing. First of all, it happened successfully because we had 40 chapters in the state of California. And we knew because we had 40 chapters, we could bring people together for the moratorium movement, which was a series of rallies. And the series of rallies grew. We started off with the first rally at Obligado Park. We started off with, I think, the first rally was 2,000 people. That was in December of 1969.
Yeah.
Then the second one.
Picture right here.
Okay. The second one we had was in February. That was 5,000 people. And then finally, August 29th, it was something like 35,000 people. So it was a series of development, okay, and that's a very complicated story, all the things that did happen. But once again, back again to the birth of the symbol. The birth of the new symbol was developed as a concept. We had buttons, we put the birth of the new symbol, and we also developed the patch, and you know, those are the kinds of things that the Brown Beret patch was actually developed by me, Ralph Ramirez, Jack Parsons. Who else was there?
John Parsons.
Yeah, we got together and we wrote up the symbol, the patch, the Brown Beret patch. And that's it right here. This is the patch, the original patch. We have the cross, which means sacrifice. The Brown Beret means unity. And La Causa, the cause of the people. That was the original patch that we had developed. And what happened was, when I went to send me to jail for 40 days, I wrote this booklet called The Birth of a New Symbol. It's called the Brown Books, the Brown Beret Manual, because we needed a manual of operation. Once again, administration, right? We needed a manual of operation. So this is the Brown Book, and it's in the files here at the Chicano Studies Library.
Here's a
That
Here's a picture of that first moratorium going down from down to Obregón Park. Here's the Brown Berets marching, leading it. December of '69, and I think did you submit it the La Causa?
I have those pictures.
There's pictures of that. There's even a video.
I think I took that picture.
Probably, there's a YouTube you can do the Chicano Moratorium. So I mean, there's a lot of people that are involved in it. You know, there's the issue with history, like who takes credit. You know, but the thing is, one thing that I did bring, I brought photos of the walkouts that the cops took of what we were doing. You know. But at least here's a picture of December '69 of the first Chicano Moratorium against the war in Vietnam. And I remember being at a meeting of the Brown Berets in '69. We had meetings, and you know, we had talked about Dr. Ralph Guzman, who did the study about the high casualty rate of Chicano. We started educating, you know, and then we had this whole discussion. I remember David said, you know, what we need to do is do a moratorium. Like, what the hell's a moratorium? You know, there's all these anti-war moratoriums. And then the first I heard of it when he said, let's do a Chicano moratorium. You know, and that's what we did, the December '69 one, to protest the high casualty rate of Chicanos in Vietnam. Because, you know, we had, like I said, people that I went to high school that were killed, you know, and started coming home to us saying we need to do something about it. And then, you know, so if people want to look at it later on.
So there's a hand way in the back. You've been waiting patiently.
Oh, okay. How you doing? A lot of times we lose information in history books, and I just wanted to know if you could probably speak to what influences you had that affects your community either today, the United States as in general, or any effects that you may have had outside of the borders of the U.S. Your movement, the work that you did. Should I speak up? Okay, sorry about that.
I think one thing is the creation of Chicano Studies departments all across the country at universities and colleges. That's one great significant thing. I mean, that's what we probably wouldn't be here in this library. We were fighting for Chicano Studies when we did the walkouts. That was one of our demands. Also, I think jobs, we opened jobs up. You know, a lot of jobs were opened up. You know, before the city, state, and the economy didn't hire us. I mean, they barely hire us now, but they didn't hire us at all. You know, the state only hires like 8% Mexican American today. what would happen to, we have assemblymen and then you get, anyway, what I'm trying to say is that we open opportunities and doors all over the place, you know, and because we fought to open those doors, because we knew that things were so bad during that time that if we did not open those doors, there would be nothing for our community and nothing for our friends and family or ourselves. There would be nothing. So we were fighting for everybody and our communities to open those doors, and those doors did get open. Unfortunately, some of those doors are closing now.
I had one second part to that.
Okay.
What's a good resource to learn about you guys, whether it's a book, a website, or a movie, or anything that you consider good resource?
I think you just, if you go to Facebook and just put Brown Beret Historical Society, okay, it's right there.
All right.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if there was someone else. Go ahead. In the black hat. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go.
Okay.
Now, I just want to make a comment real quick, and if I may. My name is Abram Moya. I was a Brown Beret but I'm from Orange County. And in Orange County during that time, it was very, very, and it still is, it has gone from outright racism to institutional racism. But we got to remember, too, that just recently they had a celebration of Brown versus the Board of Education, and which was supposedly the end of segregation in the schools. Well, that was not the main one. The main one was in the 50s, was Westminster versus the State Board of Education, Mendoza versus the School Board of Westminster. That was the catalyst for the Brown versus the Board of Education. That's not in the books. That is not being told on the television. So we still have that with the history. The other comment that I want to make is the Brown Berets have been the organization. I've been involved with a lot of student organizations from throughout the history and up to now. I'm still an activist. But the Brown Berets has been one of the main organizations that has been downplayed, scared of, put to the side, and the Brown Berets, be it that whatever they're militant or whatever ideology that they are or were or is or going to be, is that the Brown Berets were very effective. Not only did Cesar Chavez open the doors, but Brown Berets opened them up right all the way through their actions, from militancy to legal, from establishing the school board, the free clinics, all the way to the schools, because we had walkouts in Orange County too, and that was the influence of the walkouts, what the Berets did. We had started like Head Start programs and a lot of other stuff in Orange County. We even had Mr. Carlos Montes speak at an anti-police rally in Orange County, which I set that up for you at that time. But there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, and I don't think that we have gained anything. I think we're still at a stalemate now, and so right on to the Brown Berets, and the Brown Berets should be up there in the history books as the Panthers, as the SDS, as the Weathers, all of them, and the civil rights movement. And they supported David Hilliard over in Chicago, who got assassinated by the police. Fred Hammond, I'm sorry.
I think just in terms of my own practice, having interviewed people from across the country, the one thing that you find with the Berets, former Beret activists, is in fact that many of them, or most all of them, are still active in one way or another, and have been active since.
Yes.
Go ahead.
David, you mentioned a couple times today already the movie, and in there one of the kind of central characters is LAPD informant. How prevalent was that in the organization, one, and then what did you all kind of do to sort that out?
There was Fernando Sumaya, who was staying with Ralph for a while. LAPD. But Ralph was watching him though, man. And there was, Robert Avina, who passed away. Robert Avina ended up working for SWAT, but he was bad news. He was spying on us. He's causing a lot of damage. He was spying on us and building up to. He actually helped build the indictment against the Chicano 13. We all went to jail for that. Finally, the case was beat on. We won our case at Chicano 13. We won our case based on there were no Chicanos on the jury, on the grand jury. So we won that case. And Oscar Costa helped us fight that. So there was just an array of many unsung heroes in the movement, including Rosalía Muñoz. A lot of unsung heroes that we need to be focused. But I'm a little bit angry. So many years have gone by, and they never, all the academics and all the scholars and all the writers, they've never interviewed me, or they've never interviewed Ralph Ramirez. And actually we were the first, all the way from Roosevelt High School. we were the first ones to actually, start organizing from the very beginning. A long time ago, me and Ralph Ramirez, we used to play cards at Roosevelt High School. We were students, and we got really angry because of the explorers the LAPD was recruiting explorers to snitch on us. So that we organized a demonstration at Roosevelt High School, like in the 10th grade, and I got in trouble for that. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, it's just the focus on, I think we need more exposure to the history, because the history will be lost. And the history of the Brown Berets, also the social science, the movement science that was applied, was largely nonviolence. And largely, out of all the Brown Beret members, the 5,000 members, I think only one Brown Beret was killed at the UCLA riots. That was Lynn Ward. So it wasn't. We weren't like the Black Panthers. We weren't out to fight the cops. What we were doing was we were organizing events and mass demonstrations. That's what we did best, and that's what we knew how to do. Events, historical events, and people have to, you have to recognize, we did a lot using nonviolence.
One thing I disagree with David on. Can I have a word?
Yes, sure.
Okay. I think the big events speak for themselves. One of the best things that David and Ralph and all of the original group did was they came to classes in education. I was teaching at Cal State, at which there were teachers doing graduate work. They came and they presented panels on the Chicano movement, on the Brown Berets. It was the first time that these educators really heard from the people they were supposed to be educating, and they had to listen. They came to a convention of the California Association of School Psychologists in 1968. They actually broke into a session that Peter, Paul, and Mary were presenting in entertainment, but people listened, people questioned. This made a very big difference, David, because you reached the educators and they were interested, because they were interested in young people who were talking sensible, logical reality. And I think that made an enormous difference. And I think one of the things that I wish that the constituency to which you are appealing as a candidate understood that you have been somebody who has actively pursued the interests of your constituency for 40-some years. And this is a record that I would dare any politician, nationally or locally, to try to equal. Your record of speaking for and to and about and introducing your constituency to the larger world. That is so important, and it's so necessary in today's very large society that is so anonymous otherwise. So you started with talking to people who were teachers and would-be teachers, and you ended up talking to rallies and moratoria, and now I hope that the people who can vote will listen to you and vote for you, because you've proven your record. You have a record of proof. And that is not equaled by anybody in today's politics that I know of.
That's right. Yeah, because the current president person that's there has been there for umpteen years, and on immigration, on the war issues, how many years has she been? 20 years, and you know, she's done a few things, but it's time to move on, you know, so I would support David. Well, I did want to say, however, that we built the mass movement, the walkouts, the mass demonstrations. We were victims of police provocateurs and infiltration by the Public Disorder Intelligence Division, LAPD, in conjunction with the FBI. 2 major indictments against the Brown Berets. We were all indicted, right, by the Evel Younger at the time. Numerous arrests. I was beaten in the county jail as well as in the streets of Broadway at night by the sheriffs. You know, and I was actually even arrested in court one time. The first time we went to go see Sumaya, you know, they thought I was going to take them out. I go, come on, give me a break. I'm going to take nobody out in the courtroom, right? I was in the phone booth and they busted the phone booth down and said, he's got a gun. I had a briefcase, right? And Sumaya, the snitch, was testifying, and I had to go to the phone booth to call my job, say I'm gonna be late. And then they busted the door down, Sergeant Armas and the cops saying, Carlos got a gun, he's trying to kill Sumaya. I go, bullshit, they busted me, they arrested me, remember? And then they arrested Lorraine. That was just one example of the repression. I had to leave the country, go on the ground, I changed my name, I lived in Mexico, and I worked in the garment and the steel industry in El Paso, Texas, organizing on the ground because of the repression. But it was, and by the way, the repression, LAPD spying continues today. The May 1 demonstration that we had, you know, there's still a lot of LAPD spies. They have all these counterintelligence program, now they call them Homeland Security, because of Homeland Security, you know, I even forgot, 2 years ago they raided my house. It was the sheriff, SWAT team, and the FBI. You know, trying to say it because of the 42-year-old case that I had when I was at ELAC, protesting for Chicano studies, you know, I got busted for allegedly assaulting a cop. They went way back then to try to attack me today because of my anti-war work. Expressing solidarity with people in Palestine and Colombia. So the repression was heavy, and when people ask what happened to the Brown Berets, I think it was primarily the disruption, the attacks that eventually led to the Brown Berets to, you know, to stop, you know. But you know, there's a book on that. What's that guy's book? Haney, that guy.
Oh, Ian Haney. Yeah.
Oh, what's the name of his book?
Racism on Trial.
Yeah, that guy interviewed me for tongue and everything, and then wrote I'm gonna write a little essay, and all of a sudden he does a book and I didn't even know about it, man.
We actually are out of time, but I don't know. I probably should cut it. I guess officially out of time, but I guess we can stick around and ask some more questions if you like to the panelists. David Sanchez is running for office. If you could support his campaign by purchasing Expedition through Aslan or one of his other books. Community action, social community action.
Yeah, social communication for everyone. I teach Speech 101 besides teaching Chicano studies. And anyway, it took me 13 years to analyze why we have so much communication problems, so I wrote this other book. Anyway, I just say that
What district are you running?
I'm running in the 40th district, which is East LA, Downey, Paramount, Cudahy, Belgrade, St. Park. But it's important because I think we have to take the movement to another plateau. I think we lost that second move. The second move, we should have gone into the political plateau and taken power. But this is a time. This is the perfect chance, an opportunity to link our struggle to politics and get some real people elected to office who really care about the people, really care about the community. So that's why I'm running for office, because I really think that we need to bring the movement to another level, and it's time. Please elect me to Congress. I want to be a representative in Washington, D.C., and I also protect Chicano studies and protect our community. Thank you much.